Hi, GM Vietnam, GM Hanoi. How's everyone doing? Okay, I'll take it as a good. My pleasure to be here moderating this session. And I guess you already know who we have in this setup, who we have on this panel. So I actually just want to ask everyone here, how's GM Vietnam been for you? Any exciting things you've seen throughout the past week? Maybe we can start with Kenneth, because your mic probably works better.
Yeah, sure. So GM Vietnam is hosted by a great friend that came here to support. And like last year was in Ho Chi Minh, this year Hanoi, and having really great government support. We saw a little bit of kind of different mix of people, probably relatively more institutions compared to last year. So it's great so far in meeting community members here.
Yeah, I echo Kenneth's sentiment. I'm Kenny, and yeah, GM Vietnam. This is probably we've been back several years now, and so it's always been a great experience. This time around, looking for projects, applications, builders who are interested in revenue-driven products, specifically looking for grants, investment, acquisition. We are expanding and very much focusing on application layer. And so anyone in the audience who is interested, please chat with me afterwards.
My name is Fred Xu, CEO, co-founder of a company called D3. This is my first GM Vietnam. I'm very excited to present in Vietnam in general. There's two points of relevance. Number one, we're building at D3 the first blockchain for the internet. It's called Doma.xyz. Check it out. All $350 billion worth of domain names, real domain names, coming on chain in the very near future. We also have a developer program called the Doma Grant Program. Secondly, we're also very excited to work with another popular projects in Vietnam called Coin98. We're launching .vic, the .vic TLD, for millions of users. Centralized identity transcends both Web 3 and also Web 2. Thank you.
For me, I am very much excited to see how over the years GM Vietnam grew to be so big this year. It was huge. When I went to the exhibition center, I was like, wow, this is huge. And one thing I really noticed that this year I got, as always, I get a lot of people asking about listings and fundings, but this year, first time I saw a lot of projects that actually have a product or even have a revenue that are interested to attract more capital or have listing rather than all the previous year. It's always someone with a cool idea with no product. And I think this is not only the success of GM Vietnam, but it shows how industry is maturing in Vietnam and people are actually start building and solving real problems. That is a very big plus point in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I guess we have some newcomers to GM Vietnam, but I mean, Hanoi is always a new place for everyone, even if you've attended before. And back to the panel, back to the topic of today, we're discussing DeFi versus reality, what it really takes to win. And I'm sure most of you here would be familiar with what DeFi is, but then we have these industrial leaders here today. And I would love to hear from all of you, what's the biggest misconception the industry has about what it takes to succeed in the DeFi industry? And I actually think if any of you wants to speak, just go ahead. And I think we can have some more thoughts for discussion.
I'll go.
Yeah.
To be successful in DeFi, for us, it pairs with RWA. I know RWA sounds like a kind of a played out acronym. Real world assets. One thing about real world assets, domain names, for example, chat.com, people kind of know it's real. These days it's owned by Sam Altman, but one of our investors actually bought and flipped it years ago. Domain names are basically like a real property. You can use it. You can actually soon tokenize it on Doma, and then you can start borrowing against it, lending against it, fractionalizing against it, all kinds of use cases. But I like to focus in on the real part, real world asset, the real part of RWA as a foundational element of DeFi.
I have 2 points, one of which is kind of echoing RWAs. But the first one is, I think everything in crypto is DeFi. right? Like whether you call it social-fi or whether you call it GameFi or whatever you call it, at the end of the day, so far, people come and try out your product and everything because of speculation and financial incentive. I'm just going to put it out there, right? Because like, I mean, even something as powerful as Friend Tech, right, which was quite the hype for those of you guys that remember it, which was a social experiment. I think after the token launch, subsequently the activity significantly dropped. And so, you know, like that's just something to keep in mind in, you know, where we are as a stage in the industry. The second thing is the success of DeFi, I think, has always been being able to take traditional financial applications, tools, use cases, and retransform them to be accessible to everyone. The first instantiation of that was Uniswap, right? Of course, there were decentralized exchanges before Uniswap, but Uniswap was the one that really caught the momentum. And what is Uniswap? Uniswap is a stock exchange, but on a global scale, right? And anyone with an internet access can now have access to all the underlying assets, all the underlying crypto tokens, that you might not be able to do if you're not a US citizen and you want to access the US stock exchange, or if you're not a Chinese citizen and you want to access the Chinese stock exchange, right? And so we see this elimination of barriers. And this elimination of barriers isn't just geographical, it's also economical. And so you see lending protocols like Aave come into the markets, right? Before Aave, how did you guys lend money to other people? Most of you didn't, I didn't, right? But now Aave, all you need is $1 and you can put it out there and you can lend it to someone, right? Like that's extremely powerful. And so I think like the key to success in DeFi right now is to find these frictions that exist in traditional financial applications and think about how do you globalize this? How do you make this accessible to all sorts of levels of consumers all around the world?
Yeah, and I want to emphasize that point on whatever we're doing, if we're not financializing anything, there's no point of building in crypto. And I forgot to introduce myself. Actually, what we're building is a digital identity infrastructure with zero-knowledge proof verifications. And we do believe we can tokenize data as a digital asset and make it tradable, make it become like a on-chain asset. And if you think about it, most of the data transactions, the one way how you can capitalize data and in order to acquire data is actually by acquiring a company through M&A. Besides that, there's actually no way for retail to get access to data as an asset and invest in it. With our infrastructure, we're actually pushing that. We're giving retail the access to invest in data, to capitalize it. And I think like another point as well, borrow and lend, and also trading. What we're doing here, like our intersection with DeFi as well, on that point, what we call the programmable money. Like what you, let's assume stablecoin is the money. How do you build program and composability to the money is actually through data. And we believe the source of the data should be identity data, right? So right now, basically, Aave treat everyone the same. Like all wallets are the same, your collateral ratio are the same. But it shouldn't be the case, because if you're borrowing money from a bank, like if you have a good credit score, if you have like good repayment history, like your interest rate would be lower, and so on. So like we shouldn't treat everyone the same, and the power of blockchain is really that composability. And with digital identity, we do believe we can bring that composability, programmability to trading, to payment, and borrow and lend.
In my opinion, whenever we talk about topics as complex, we usually try to go to the very extremes of the spectrum. Either we talk about like a super permissionlessness, zero knowledge kind of a DeFi where everything is done through the smart contracts, or we go to the complete opposite and talk about the centralized finance and how exchanges work or how banks work. And in my opinion, like success doesn't lie in, of course the technology is very important, but in my opinion, success lies in how we solve real people's problem and how decentralized finance can actually solve that issue in one way or another. And in my opinion, the solution comes from a hybrid rather than focusing on a one spectrum or one aspect of the technology can solve. For example, at Bitget, which is a centralized exchange, but we still have Bitget on-chain where you can directly trade assets on-chain that are not listed. On the other end, on Bitget Wallet, we have a MasterCard that you can literally buy any asset, and whenever you tap that card, it goes, sells, turns it USDT or whatever denomination you want to transact, and makes that all these actions seamlessly in 1 second. And in my opinion, that is more powerful than thinking a very complex, decentralized, exchange where a very niche of 20 people can do very complex action, which is still important and still mandatory to have in order to innovate and to build. But when we look at the adoption and scalability, in my opinion, whatever can breach these complex things and translate them into very simple action that solves a problem is much more prone to guarantee success rather than doing something so niche that is so early and people don't actually need it at this point.
I think there's been a lot of great comments, great opinions, but I think all of these really ties back into while DeFi is decentralized, it's still the financial component is very important, and how it actually ties with the reality, how it helps solve real life problems is a really important thing. And I believe all four of you, all four teams have been trying very hard to solve that. And to solve these problems, of course, it's about how you improve user experience. And a lot of these users could be new users. So in your experiences, what are some of the common pain points for onboarding new users? For new users when they embark on the new journey. And what do you think is your role to help them to improve that experience in onboarding into DeFi?
I can go first. One of the I think key lessons we learned even from Web 2 was the Amazon single button checkout. It's very important. It's very expensive tool because Amazon don't own it. They actually, that single button checkout, they rent it from another company, but it makes them millions. And today, one of the biggest problems is on user onboarding, how many clicks you have to do in order to actually have a wallet or have an exchange account, especially with legal frames and legislation, all these KYCs, KYBs, address approvals, reality, human checks. There are so many actions. It takes you, at least 30 good minutes in order to set up an exchange account. And we are still not talking about decentralized exchange where you also need to understand how to put a gas fee on and do all this action. In my opinion, it's so hard. It's so hard. While, you can download Netflix, social login, and then pay with your Apple Pay and move on with your life. Until we are able to build that, single touch point, we will be having a very long way to go. And to build that single touch point, we need also technology to develop, because now we collect and verify that you're human in every step. And if you have 5 exchanges, let's say Binance, Bitget, OKX, it means you do it 5 times, but probably we need a technology that you can do it in a single click, the same way you do your Apple Pay, and move on to the next step. Same goes if you today decide to, buy any random token from Uniswap, PancakeSwap, decentralized wallet. You will be going through the 7 rounds of hell, understanding what chain it's built. Is it the right contract number? Is it the right logo? Am I buying the right token? Is it happening? Then you put an order, then order filled. Is there a market maker? Is there enough offer? Is there enough liquidity? Sometimes you see that, you put an $80 order and order not fills because there isn't enough depth, and so many other problems that come in place that as a normal user you shouldn't be bothered with at all. But unfortunately, user experience is a huge missing point in there. Yes, technology is beautiful, but if it doesn't work, then why is it there in the first place?
Yeah, to expand on Vugar's point, it's all about user experience. I almost have a stupidly obvious example, and I'm going to ask this room, how many people have actually had a problem copying and pasting a 30-digit address, right, and having it hacked or made some mistake, right? At least half the room, right? So we see a world with domain names. Here's a problem. There are 6 .crypto projects. There's like 5 .apes and there's like 10 .sol projects on Web3. People cannot rely, and next year, there's only gonna be one of them, 1 .crypto, 1 .sol, 1 .b, and what have you, right? That's global infrastructure you can actually rely on. So once people start realizing that sending money from Andy.sol to Fred.ape or vice versa is both simple, secure, and easy, then I think you're going to start seeing the next billion plus users from Web 2, or at least Web 2 crypto curious, come onto Web 3, and also have Web 3 people start using the real rails of the internet that powers 5 billion people today.
Yeah, I think I echo the same problem that the previous 2 speakers talked about, which is ultimately user experience and the complications of user experience. And I want to bring something hopeful to the table here, because the way that I see it, right, Web 2 is like Microsoft and Web 3 is like Linux, right? Most people in this room know Windows. They use or have used Windows operating systems in the past, right? It's very friendly. It's very easy. You flip on your laptop and all of a sudden it's there. It's built with product managers. It's built with people who think, how does the end user want this to be, right? Crypto, blockchain, it's built with engineers. It's built open source. And so it's very much experimental and in a laboratory, just like Linux, at least how Linux used to be. And so you can't just open up a laptop and you have Ubuntu installed on your computer. You have to go through like these complicated processes and download it and then open it up and unzip all this other stuff. And then hopefully at the end of the day, the operating system is running on your computer. And like you have to go through 20 different steps versus just buying a Windows laptop and everything's done, right? Web 2 apps are Windows laptops. You just turn them on and they work. Right now, Web 3 applications are Ubuntu systems and Ubuntu applications. And it's extremely complicated unless you're some type of computer nerd, right? I've been in this space for 13 years now. I started as a Bitcoin miner. And even today, when I send a frickin' transaction, I'm nervous. Like, it doesn't matter who I send it to, even if it's a friend, because I don't know if it's a friend. It's just a random alphanumeric copy-paste, right? So, but I think that's where we are as an industry right now. But I think where we're headed as an industry is the future of where we see Linux today. And yes, it's still built for nerds, but at the same time, Apple and Mac OS is derived from Linux. Samsung and your Android phones are all derived from Linux. And these provide a much more seamless, much easier user experience that I think the crypto space needs to evolve into as well. And so a lot of the focus we have at Manta right now is thinking about how do we drive those applications to make sure that these are user experience first, value providing applications, and then blockchain and everything else is underneath, right? Because when you use your Apple phone, you don't care which carrier you're connected to right now, right? It could be a completely foreign character where many of us are international here. And so why do you have to care which blockchain you're using? Why do you have to care whether you're on Arbitrum or Base or Solana? Like this tribalism is too nerdy, but not user friendly. And so, yeah, I think like the user friendliness just takes a lot of that sort of product thinking, but I think we're headed as an industry in that direction.
Yeah, I think we're maybe a little bit hot take, but I do believe the wallet friction, we're already beyond that age. I think like a couple of years ago, we were talking about like storing your private key and all that. Like we have an SDK basically distributing to the largest telecom in South Korea, like an app with 200 million users with account extraction wallet, global smart account. You don't need to store a private key. You don't need to pay any gas. You don't need to sign any transactions. So I do believe we're past that age of wallet friction. It's more about how do you educate your users on financial literacy, right? So if you look at, we still got a lot of like buzzwords in DeFi, and like it's so hard to understand, right? It's impossible. But if you see like recently Phantom integrating with Hyperliquid, That is actually providing, Phantom is not inventing a DeFi product, but they're providing distribution, abstracting everything away about Hyperliquid to the users. And I would say Hyperliquid users are power users, but how can you distribute to retail users is actually what we're doing, right? Like we work with existing consumer apps with tens of millions, hundreds of millions of users, and you expose DeFi products to those users. And same for like DomainFi as well. Like it can basically, we can help distribute like to our users, and they can get access to that as an asset class. So I think that, and also like, as I said, like the financial literacy, crypto is like creating a very interesting dynamics to normal retail users on financial literacy. If you ask like a normal users about like borrow and lend and collateral and like trading and all that, most of them, I would say 90% of the younger generation wouldn't get exposure to that. But what's interesting about crypto is you basically accelerate that financial literacy and even letting like kids younger than 18 to understand like how to manage their funds, how to hedge, how to do risk management. And that is an educational process. And just to conclude, like I don't think it's about the wall of friction anymore, but like how you can expose DeFi products to normal retail users, educate the users on financial literacy, and also abstract all the buzzwords away from the users.
I wanted to add something to what you mentioned. Like whenever we talk about a normal retail user in crypto, it's actually a very power financial user because let's say average user of an average bank, these people don't invest, they don't even have saving account. They're a passive user of a, I don't know, bank card, credit card. They just get your salary deposited, they cash it out, they spend it anyway. While an average crypto retail user is actually a power user. They know, they trade, they buy, they sell, they farm. And when we talk about an average crypto user, it's actually still a very powerful user. And we need to, usually whenever we build product, we build for that user in mind that they're gonna trade, they need 1, 2, 3, 4. While if we talk about mass adoption, we need to make a product that is dummy proof the same way you open your Apple laptop and then you install all the apps and it is good to go because probably you won't even build an app yourself. And I think that is what we are still missing in crypto, that we need to build much simpler products for the masses that they really don't need to know how it works as long as it works.
Well, we've heard a lot from all four of you, and I guess like one of the main keywords is how we make it easy, like how to make access easy and how we can distribute this technology to new users rather than focusing on like the innovations, which might be for more like advanced users. I just want to say, if it's possible, I would really appreciate if the audience could keep the volume a bit lower. Thank you. And I think while we're all here gathering in Hanoi, it would be interesting to explore how all of you thinks of like localization in different markets, especially if there's anything about the Vietnamese market that interests you. I would love to hear like your thoughts, and I'm sure like the audience here who are from the local scene would be interested to see your thoughts. Yeah.
I think from the retail perspective, especially if you talk about like a crypto users, not only Vietnam, we can map out based on the income and disposable income level and the user behavior, because in my opinion, the key driver for crypto and the way we keep always talking about financial incentive, because it's much huger than any other industry. Therefore, we always focus on power users, people who trade, people who buy and sell, because the jump is really huge and motivation is huge to learn something new because incentive is big. And when we talk about, for example, Vietnamese market, one of the greatest aspects is that user acquisition cost is pretty low, and the user incentives are as low as compared to like Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam. We will be kind of putting them all in a similar basket. What makes Vietnam much different than any other markets, let's say neighboring market, is that Vietnam is not only a consumer market, but it's also a developer market, especially with all the game studios here and knowledge of an average person in terms of the financials, but also access to the talent. For example, I always say for Bitget, Vietnam is one of the important markets because we don't only market in this country, but we have more than 300 employees here who actually build tools and products for Vietnamese people by Vietnamese people. It's very important to focus on Vietnam not only as a market where it's easier and cheaper to acquire a user, but also there's a great talent pool that you can access, and also a good ecosystem of the builders and developers that produce new products, which goes hand in hand and makes it very cool place where you can develop, where you can test, and then if something works, it spills over across the other regions and takes something global. And I think that's a huge potential that as foreign investors we need to explore, but also the locals needs to take care of the ecosystem and make sure that this brain drain doesn't happen and the talented ventures don't go away, because I still believe there isn't enough capital in the market. But with Web3, you're not obstructed with your country or your market. You can literally attract funds from US, from Middle East, or from any other, virtually from anywhere in the world, and still develop, test, cheap user acquisition, a good incentive to build your product. And with all this, like a full cycle, there's a huge potential to actually build and ship products out this market.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, I'm a dad.
That was really
I
good.
agree with Vugar. I'm very excited about the Vietnam market because it's 100 million users. To give you an example, 3 months ago, we were actually invited by .vn, the operator .vn, which pretty much every citizen that I know of in Vietnam interacts with, right? So if you think about the potential of the Web 2, Web 3 crossover experience, you got to make those Web 2 people crypto curious. And I think that what's exciting about this country is that through what I understand through legislation and the government, they're going to be one of the most crypto savvy countries, I'm sure, in coming years, almost as savvy as the US. I'll say it, okay?
Yeah, I think I came to Vietnam this year trying to find and identify opportunities, and I think I found a really good one. But I'm not going to tell you guys what it is because I want to get there first. But it does have to do with the crossover between crypto users and real-world applications, not simply assets. I think the Vietnamese market is a very perfect opportunity for this because not only are the regulatory headwinds starting to become much more positive and crypto-friendly, but also, and I'm sure the Bitget team knows this very well, right? Like Vietnam is, I think, probably in terms of population density, the most, if not one of the most, huge crypto adopters in the world. And so you've got this combination of all these people that have crypto, and now all of a sudden you have the regulatory headwinds that allow potentially new opportunities to bring that crypto into the real world. And I think that creates a lot of new business ideas. It creates a lot of new market expansion locally. And so that's about as much as I can say. The real treasure I'm going to hide, close to my heart, but hopefully everyone can start thinking this way.
I think so. Maybe just bring back to kind of like what we are building and what Vietnam government just announced a couple of days ago. So the Vietnam government basically just announced launching an NDA chain. It's basically a government-run digital identity chain. So it says a lot on how much the government is actually pushing around digital identity. They're going to unify all data, healthcare, education, and entertainment, and all those data into one place and make those data verifiable, right? So you see the government actually pushing a lot on that. And the main thing is like different country, different jurisdictions, you do have a different way to approach that region. We talk to regulators in the UAE, we talk to regulators in different regions, and we just need to take that approach very differently. I think we're entering a phase where we cannot ignore regulation and government anymore, but is how do you take the appropriate approach in different regions and work very closely with the regulators on that. But it's very exciting to see like the government in Vietnam is actually pushing their own chain out. Yeah, I'm going to meet them and very exciting. So and that's one of the reasons why we're in Hanoi, basically where the governments are at.
So we've heard about everyone's opinion on the Vietnamese market, and I'm sure everyone is very curious on what Kenny's thoughts are on. But I guess we are almost time, and we've heard a lot from all four of you, and we'll probably continue to hear more from Vugar for the next the next keynote. And I just want to thank all of you, and I hope this panel has been an interesting food for thought for all of you listening. And I'm sure if you have more questions for them, please feel free to talk to them after this panel. And I'm sure they'll be happy to answer and discuss further. So thank you, everyone. And I guess this is the end of this panel discussion. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.